Hi everyone, welcome back. In today's episode, a recap of the Oscars and Warner Brothers' momentous night, a discussion on the NFL potentially adding a Thanksgiving Eve game, plus exploring the impetus behind a new Family Guy spinoff, which Fox just announced. All this and more on Pathway to the Podium. It was one award after another for Warner Brothers Sunday night. The studio triumphed with 11 Oscars, 6 for one battle after another. Best Director, Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Editing, Casting, Supporting Actor. 4 for Sinners, Original Screenplay, Original Score, Cinematography, Lead Actor. And 1 for Weapons, Supporting Actress. Now there was a bit of a twist in 2 categories there, as one battle and Sinners actually each upset the other. A lot of pundits had pegged one battle for Best Cinematography, following its win at the ASC Awards, but that, on Oscar night, went to Sinners. Similarly, many had penciled in Sinners for the new Best Casting category, after Sinners won Best Ensemble at the Actor Awards, but that one went to one battle. Let's dive deeper into one battle after another. This is the crowning achievement for Paul Thomas Anderson, a director who immediately caught the attention of his peers with Boogie Nights when he was in his mid-20s, and has helmed some of the most intriguing, immersive, and bold movies of the past 3 decades, intricately layered, which run the full gamut of human emotions. You know, a couple years ago, Christopher Nolan had his moment. Now it's PTA's. Personally, I'm really glad he got it. One Battle to me is a modern masterpiece of filmmaking, and I think it will age very well. Both PTA and Nolan are on my Mount Rushmore of contemporary directors, alongside David Fincher and Denis Villeneuve. Coming off of Oppenheimer, Nolan has the highly anticipated adaptation of The Odyssey, releasing this July. And Fincher is directing The Adventures of Cliff Booth, which is based on a script from Quentin Tarantino, which serves as a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Villeneuve has gotten to fulfill 2 of his childhood dreams, directing the Dune franchise and an upcoming James Bond film. You know, PTA's acceptance speech for Best Film was pure class. Recommend checking it out if you didn't catch it. Going back to the awards, Warner Brothers was presented with a conundrum, and this is a great conundrum to have, over which of their films they should campaign harder for. Sinners came in with a record 16 nominations, and One Battle After Another was close behind at 13. I mentioned papaya rules last week with regard to McLaren. This was kind of a similar scenario in having 2 extremely strong contenders battling it out. This was very much Warner Brothers Oscars. Fitting, considering how much they've been in the news in the past year. Obviously the bidding war between Paramount and Netflix, but also the tremendous risk, these swing for the fences type projects, with Minecraft movie, Weapons, Sinners, One Battle, and the collab with Apple in the F1 movie. All of these which hit commercially and or critically. Now, admittedly, they've had a couple of misses to start 2026, but given the studio's impressive track record in 2025, hopefully other studios will allow their execs and creatives to take a few more creative risks. While some identified Sinners' victories at the Actor Awards as a sign the film was gaining momentum leading into the Academy Awards, award shows that historically have been most indicative of the Oscars outcome. PGA, DGA, editing, ASC, not to mention many of the international ceremonies, all pointed toward One Battle taking Best Picture. And that's exactly what happened. Also worth highlighting, Ryan Coogler will own the rights to Sinners 25 years after its release, which means, come around 2050, Coogler will directly receive royalties that come from streaming, broadcasts, other licensing agreements, and merchandising, all those streams of revenue, which typically would go to the studio. It's not often you see this kind of arrangement, and it's to be determined whether directors in subsequent years would be able to convince studios to give them the Coogler deal. Perhaps the most intrigue of the night centered around the acting categories. Outside of lead actress, which Jessie Buckley was a lock with her performance in Hamnet, lead actor, supporting actor, and supporting actress were very much up for grabs. There was such elation in the auditorium from Michael B. Jordan. He's clearly well liked. There are several viral videos of him afterwards at In-N-Out with his trophy, and people going absolutely berserk. I think back to Jordan being on The Wire as a teenager. It's pretty neat to think some 2.5 decades later, he's standing on stage accepting the Lead Actor Academy Award. It's very cool. John Penn joins Rarefied Air with his 3rd Oscar, and Amy Madigan won 40 years after her first nomination. The look of affection and pride on Ed Harris's face as she was announced the winner was certainly a highlight of the festivities. A solid night for Netflix as well, as Frankenstein picked up 3 Craft Awards, and K-Pop Demon Hunters won Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song. Apple's F1 the Movie got a well-deserved Best Sound win. In terms of the ceremony itself, I commend the producers for the extended in memoriam montage. It's very much needed given the sheer number and prominence of people within the movie industry we've lost in the past year. Robert Redford, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton, some true giants. It certainly feels like a closing of a chapter for one of Hollywood's best generations. Rob Reiner's death and the surrounding tragedy is still difficult to process. And now when it comes to the in memoriam segment, there'll always be some grumblings over who didn't make it in. It's hard to determine where that cutoff should exactly be. I personally would have liked David Keeley to have been included, given how instrumental he was with just about literally every IMAX film that's been made. Overall, though, this Academy Awards actually felt like a celebration of the year's films, which is how it should always be. Moving to some SportsBiz news. The NFL is considering adding a Thanksgiving Eve game to the calendar as soon as this year, per ESPN's Adam Schefter. If it does happen, that means the NFL, on the week of Thanksgiving, will have, get ready, a Wednesday game, 3 games on Black Friday, 3 games on Thanksgiving, a Black Friday game held in the afternoon in order to be compliant with the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961, a typical Sunday slate of games, and Monday Night Football. So Wednesday, 3 on Thursday, Black Friday, typical Sunday slate, Monday Night Football. And who knows, maybe the league could add another Black Friday game in an early afternoon window. I wouldn't rule it out. You could have multiple Friday games on that weekend. It is possible logistically. But what about this Thanksgiving Eve game? Who will get it? Per John Orand of Puck, the NFL is looking to lock in new media rights deals with its existing partners prior to the 2026 season kicking off. Now, a lot of people seem surprised by the timing of this, but they really shouldn't be. The league and these broadcasters have every right to negotiate a new deal whenever they want. They don't have to wait for the deals to expire or for the opt-out to kick in. It's just like when a player renegotiates a contract with the team they play for. This can occur at any time. The very threat of the NFL exercising the opt-out, in turn, gives the league leverage. Now, that being said, CBS's situation is slightly different, as Skydance's acquisition of Paramount to firm New Paramount triggered a change of control provision, which allows the NFL to reopen that particular deal if they so wish. So, expect the NFL and these revised deals to carve out inventory to create a singular or multiple new packages, which you have to think the streamers will show particular interest in. This is all part of a broader strategy to identify new opportunities for standalone game windows and maximize their value. Perhaps this new Thanksgiving Eve game is tied to one of these new packages, or maybe it will be shopped individually. Rand also mentioned the upcoming Melbourne, Australia game, which would be 49ers versus Rams, will be packaged with a group of other games. That package could involve the 4 games the NFL received from Disney/ESPN as part of the NFL Media/NFL Network sale. Now, this could all change, but Austin Karp and Ben Fisher of Sports Business Journal have identified YouTube as a potential suitor for a package. YouTube aired the Brazil game last season and is now the home of Sunday Ticket. By the way, as a nod to the previous segment we just did, the Oscars go to YouTube starting in 2029. After 100 editions, the first was a private ceremony. The subsequent year, it had a radio broadcast. It was televised starting with the 25th edition. And come the 101st edition in 2029, the Oscars will exclusively be on streaming. Very symbolic. And speaking of streaming, one of the strongest streaming performers is the long-running animated comedy Family Guy. Fox recently announced they have given a 2-season order to a Family Guy spinoff titled Stewie, which will follow the evil genius toddler as he attends a different preschool. It is planned to premiere during the 2027-28 TV season, with episodes airing on Fox, streaming next day on Hulu. Now remember, Disney got The Simpsons, Family Guy, and other Seth MacFarlane created shows as part of their acquisition of 21st Century Fox. So even though these series air on the Fox broadcast network, Disney is the studio that now produces them. And in 2025, last year, The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, and Bob's Burgers, all animated comedies which at one point or another have been part of the animation domination block, each received 4 season renewals. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4-year renewal, adding considerable inventory to the streaming library after the broadcast run concludes. So while these shows were first aired on Fox, admittedly their linear viewership pales in comparison to what it would be, a decade or 2 ago, unsurprisingly. So the point here is about adding to the catalog for the streaming binge watchers. Combined, those first series that I mentioned have over 2,000 episodes. So, why a Stewie spinoff? Shows get more expensive over time. There are lots of residuals, a lot of people, particularly talent, that get paid. A spinoff cleans the slate to some extent, essentially resetting the clock and evading heftier contracts. This can be accomplished by having different main characters and a different setting, but still containing elements of the original series in order to draw people in. The history of television is full of this pattern. Consider a show like Yellowstone. Before it became a ratings juggernaut, Paramount made the decision to license out exclusive streaming rights to Comcast's Peacock. This was a decision Paramount would deeply regret, as the show's popularity exploded. In order to boost the profile of Paramount Plus, they ordered a bunch of Yellowstone spin-offs, essentially acting as a way to bypass the streaming arrangement they had with Peacock for the OG show. So that's why there's 1883, 1923, the Casey-centric Marshalls, which premiered on March 1st and, by the way, was just renewed for a second season, The Madison, which dropped this past weekend, and Dutton Ranch, an upcoming series following the characters of Beth and Rip. Each of these shows are available to stream on Paramount Plus. Will there be a Peter, Lois, and or Brian spinoff in the Family Guy universe in the near future? Who knows? But Family Guy is still going strong, and now it's going to have a less expensive offshoot available to stream too. Based on feedback from listeners, I'm renaming this closing segment as Jake's Takes because that rhymes much better. At the USATF Half Marathon Championships in Atlanta on March 1, an official lead vehicle with an accompanying motorcycle took a wrong turn. The leading runners followed the vehicles and went off the course, costing them over 2 minutes in their podium positions. At the LA Marathon, a week later, the runner in the lead was guided off track by a motorcade. He quickly realized the error, but the several seconds he spent going the wrong way proved very costly, as he was beaten at the finish line by the absolute smallest of margins. That very same day, several hours earlier and on another continent, at the women's Strade Bianche, the Strade Bianche Donne, a one-day cycling race held in Italy, a group of cyclists who were considered the favorites to win the event followed a race motorbike as it took a wrong turn, once again denying them any chance of winning. Now, context matters. In the Atlanta race, the incident stemmed from an officer down call. An officer had been hit by a vehicle nearby. As is customary in such situations, race-assigned police officers left their posts to respond. The lead vehicle and motorcycle drivers subsequently thought the race was being rerouted, and the runners followed along. With the men's and women's Strade, these races involve a series of pavement and long gravel/dirt sectors. So going off track very much looks like staying on track at certain portions of the course. In the end, the responsibility first and foremost is on the competitors to know the route, which of course is announced well in advance. Now, that being said, race organizers should make a much greater effort to communicate which direction the athletes and the security and camera operators that follow them should be going. All personnel should be completely familiar with the designated route. If the situation suddenly changes for whatever reason, offering updates in real time could prove difficult, but every effort should be made to do so. The entire goal should be to lessen confusion as much as possible. These races are hard enough physically. It shouldn't have to be an exercise in mental acuity, geography, or geometry too. The story should be about celebrating the winner, not discussing the placement of a corner or some cones, or some misunderstanding that puts into question the authenticity of a victory. These are unfortunate but very vulnerable moments. Lastly, the Bahrain Grand Prix and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which was scheduled for April, have been cancelled. Talked about this last week. It was extremely unlikely these races could be held while the conflict in the Middle East unfolded. F1 essentially goes on an extended hiatus after March 29th Japanese Grand Prix, not return to action until the start of May in Miami. Now this gives the teams plenty of time to continue R&D, and it also gives FIA leaders time to discuss potential rule changes. Undoubtedly, it's an enormous loss of revenue for Formula One and those venues. Notably, this means that there will be only 5 races where the compression ratio is taken only at ambient temperature, rather than 7. And as of the post of this podcast, 2 of those races, 2 of the now 5, of course, have already been run. F1's statement made it clear no makeup races would be scheduled for April. However, that statement never explicitly said that the Bahrain and Saudi race couldn't be held later this year. Kind of get the impression they phrased that very carefully. And I think that was intentional, keeping the door open, as it were. But as of right now, it appears the season has been reduced from 24 to 22 races. And notably, that does fulfill all media TV contracts. They don't have to do 24. 22 is sufficient. But that being said, they still get a lot of revenue from conducting these other races. So we'll see if they come up with a workaround or not. I mean, the calendar is tricky here. I'm not entirely sure where they could do it. Maybe, sometime this summer, but still that's not that far away from now, and this conflict could still very much be ongoing. Plus, that's usually during the summer is when teams like to have their break, have time off. It's also extremely hot in the Middle East during the summer, so I don't know if it could work or not, but it does seem that, like I said, at the very least, F1 is trying to give themselves as much wiggle room as possible, let's say. So, that does it for this episode. Please remember to subscribe and follow if you are so inclined. Full episodes of this podcast are available on X, Twitter, and YouTube. For Twitter, that's at Jake A. Klein. That's JakeAKline, and at Pathway to the Pod. With YouTube, that is at Pathway to the Podium Pod. Also, please be sure to shoot a follow to on Instagram. It's Pathway to the Podium. And send any inquiries you may want to send via email to pathwaytothepodium@gmail.com. Have a great day, everyone.